Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online character build video with me, Sherman. Today guys, we are taking a look at the Tempest Storm Mage. This is a interesting kind of throw out there, so I hope you guys like it. But before we get started, disclaimer, this is a roleplay, casual play type build. This is not meant for meta play. Now, moving on to the story behind these. They are pretty much exactly what they sound like. They are mages who focus mainly on the storm side of magic. They don't deal so much in Daedric or dark magic, even though they do have training in it. They are more dedicated to the storm aspects. So let's go ahead and get into it. So with this character, we are a Breton. Breton just seemed to work really good with this. I tried every race pretty much under the sun, and Breton worked the best, I would say, with my own play style. So it worked really well. Any race can play this. Again, it doesn't have to be just a Magicka-based race. You can even play this with a Wood Elf. It works really good. You'll still have 32k Magicka, around 18k health, and 12k, about 14k stamina with a Wood Elf. Now, to play this as a damage dealer, which is what its primary role is, you're going to put 64 points into Magicka. If you do want to play this as a healer, leave the Magicka where it is. If you want to play this more as a tank, you do have to equip Structured Entropy on your bar, and you want to put as much health into health to give you as close to 30k as possible, and the rest back into Magicka. Alright. Now, going over the stats, we have 34k max Magicka, 18k health, 12k max stamina with a Breton. We do have 1750 mag recovery with 383 health recovery, 797 stam recovery, and all this stuff plays really well into the character and its design. As you can see, we have about a 2092 spell damage with a 59% spell critical. This gets higher. We have 14k spell resist with a 13,307 physical resist. That's about as best as I could get out of it, guys, to be honest. Now, moving on, we are using the Thief Mundus Stone for when we play damage dealer. You can use the Lover Mundus Stone if you want higher penetration values, or even the Apprentice Mundus Stone for the higher spell damage. But with this one, I decided to go with the Thief Mundus Stone for the higher crit value. Now, we are using, if you want to play this as a healer, you can use the Atronach Mundus Stone for the higher mag recovery. Even though you really don't need it. Or you can also use the healing one that gives you greater healing done to your allies and stuff. That's a really good one. And then on top of that, you can also use the Lady Mundus Stone or the Lord Mundus Stone for tanking. Lady Mundus Stone is better because it's going to give you those higher resistance values. Moving on to food, we do use Witchmother's Potent Brew when we play damage dealer. This gives us mag recovery, max Magicka, and max health. This is really important. Alright, moving on now to our equipment and gear. Starting with our potions, Tripots for when you're tanking, and then Spell Power Pots for when you're doing damage or healing. Alright. Now moving on to the sets. The first set we have here, and a lot of people are going to recognize this right out the door, this is Stormfist. Now Stormfist does give you a little bit of stam recovery. Don't worry about that. You can actually take advantage of having that little bit of extra stam recovery for things like dodge rolling, blocking, and breaking free, getting those resources back. Now, the nice thing about this is that when you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to create a Thunder Fist to crush the enemy, dealing X amount of shock damage every second for 3 seconds, and then to all enemies within 4 meters. And then the final one is the fist closes and crushes the enemies, dealing X amount of physical damage. This effect can occur every 8 seconds. So this pretty much will be going off all the time. Moving on to the next set. It is Scathing Mage. This is why we don't put a lot into our spell damage. We get more out of this. And this one on the 2-piece gives you max Magicka, 3-piece spell crit, 4-piece spell crit, and the 5-piece. When you deal direct critical damage, you have a 20% chance to increase your spell damage by 516 for 6 seconds. This effect can occur once every 6 seconds. You pretty much get this all the time. And then moving on to the other set that we run, we do run Netch's Touch. Now, Netch's Touch works really good with this because it focuses mostly on shock damage. With this character, you will be using dual lightning staves, and on top of that, a lot of shock damage skills. So most of your damage is going to come from shock damage, and this is where this plays into effect really well. 2-piece adds spell crit, 3-piece adds max magicka, 4-piece adds spell damage, and then the 5-piece, when you deal shock damage, you get 400 added to your spell damage abilities. So your spell damage for shock is going to be higher than all other sources. And if you are playing a dark elf or a high elf with this, you do a lot more damage. But you do have to remember their recovery rates aren't as good, and their sustainability isn't as good as a Breton. Alright, now we're going to go over the traits and enchants, starting with the gear on the body. The helm, we are using a heavy helm, reinforced. This is to maximize our survivability with resistances. We also get the multi-fact enchant in there, the tri-stat. This gives you magicka, stamina, and health, so you can hybridize your character to play the tank, healer, damage dealer role. On the shoulders, we are also using Stormfist, of course, medium, max magicka, enchant, divines. And the divines is to increase our Mudstone effect, to maximize it, and the max magicka is also to maximize our magicka pool. We have this Divines Max Magicka on all small pieces. So the gloves, the belt, and the boots are all light Divines with that Max Magicka. Now, the 2 pieces that are heavy and medium are the helm and shoulders. The rest of the body is all light. Now, moving on to the chest, we are using a well-fitted, which reduces our roll cost of roll dodge and sprint by 5%, and also we have tri-stat on here as well. On all the big pieces, you'll have tri-stats. The reason why, to hybridize to play more effectively in the tank, healer, damage dealer. Moving on to the legs, again, we are using well-fitted, tri-stat with that setup, so you can play the 3 rolls, and then the well-fitted so you can dodge roll more cheaply and sprint more cheaply. Moving on to the rings and necklace. The 2 rings are both tri-rune with spell damage enchants. This is so you can maximize your spell damage while also maximizing your other stats so you can hybridize. Moving on to the necklace, we are using an infused magic recovery necklace. You can use Bloodthirsty here if you want more damage output, but you already have an execute, so you don't really need much more. Moving on to the weapons. On the main bar, we are using a Lightning Staff of Netch's Touch and Nirnhoned with a shock damage enchant. Remember, we are focused on dealing shock damage as much as we can, so that front bar Nirnhoned is going to boost our spell damage, and it's also going to boost our shock damage with that shock damage enchant. On the back bar, we have an infused Lightning Netch's Touch Staff with a weapon and spell damage enchant. This is where we take advantage of that higher spell damage and also weapon damage if we need it for different situations. Alright, so now that you guys have seen all that, I do want to mention a few things about food. If you play this as a tank, you are going to want to use Longfin Pasty with melon sauce, so you can maximize your health, stamina, and magicka pools so you can tank more effectively. Alright, moving on now to our skills. Starting with class skills. As you can see, I have ultimate, active abilities, and passives all unlocked on all 3 of my class skill lines, and the reason why is so I can take advantage of every skill and ability I have, because just because I'm focused more on the storm calling side than I am Daedric summoning and dark magic doesn't mean I can't use these skills. It means that they're just not going to be as effective as my shock damage is. So I do use these skills in different situations. Now, moving on to the weapons, we primarily use Destruction Staff, and as you can see, I have the ultimate, active abilities, and passives unlocked, and this is so I can use Ice Staff, Fire Staff, and Lightning Staff if I need to. I primarily use Lightning Staffs for when I'm playing Damage Dealer. I use a Fire Staff with a healer, and the reason I use the Fire Staff instead of a Lightning Staff is because the Fire Staff will do more damage overall than the Lightning Staff will with that setup. And then when I'm playing a healer, I use a restoration staff on the back bar also, so I can use more effective heals. And I will learn those skills if necessary, the passives and active abilities and ultimate here, so I can use those to my advantage when playing healer. When I play a tank, though, I use an Ice Staff with a Lightning Staff combo. The reason why, Ice Staff is designed for tanking, so I would prefer to use that for that purpose. I can tank with just Lightning Staffs, but I'm more of an off tank than I am a main tank. If you're going to main tank with this, you will want to equip a Frost Staff. Alright, going over armor. Light armor, we are primarily light armor users, so we are going to take all the active, or going to take the active ability and the passives here, so we can take advantage of every aspect of light armor. Medium armor, the top two and the bottom one. This one I made a mistake on, and clicked on that. It happens, because I get so caught up. But, yeah, so the top two and the bottom one. The main reason why you take Dexterity and Windwalker, just so people know, is for when you do use stamina abilities. The Dexterity is going to increase your weapon critical, so any stamina ability you use is going to do mostly physical poison disease damage, which is based off of weapon critical. So we want to boost our weapon critical with that. So that's why we have this here. That's why we have this unlocked, to reduce our stamina cost and increase our stamina recovery. And then athletics is to increase our movement speed while sprinting and reducing our dodge roll cost. Heavy armor, we take the top three, and this is so we can take advantage of wearing one medium, one heavy, and we can get the passives from them. Moving on to soul magic, you can choose to take the ultimate and active ability if you want, and the first passive if you want. Those three are optional. The bottom two I would not say are optional because they can help you out in late game. Moving on to Fighter's Guild, I do unlock the ultimate active abilities and passives because I can use these abilities in different situations, whether I'm a tank, healer, or damage dealer. Mage's Guild, ultimate active abilities and passives, same reason why I can take advantage of all these different skills and abilities in different situations. Same thing with Psijic Order. Same thing with Undaunted. So all these different abilities, I unlock them so I have access to them for different roles I might play and in different situations I might be in. Whether it's PvE, PvP, whatever, I have access to all these different tools for that purpose. Moving on to Alliance War, I unlock the skills that best reflect my PvE playstyle, so ultimate and active abilities on Assault Line. On support, I do unlock these three abilities, the ultimate and the two active abilities, plus this one passive because I can utilize all of them in PvE. Moving on to race, we are Breton. Breton is really good, like I said, because we get the Gift of Magus, which increases our Mech Magicka by 2,000. We also get Spell Atonement, which increases our spell resistance by 2310, and also the effect is doubled when we're afflicted with Burning, Chilled, and Concussed, and it also increases our mag recovery by 100. And then Magicka Mastery reduces the Magicka cost of our abilities by 7%. Moving on to Alchemy. Medicinal use is really good when using potions, resulting effects last 30% longer. And then on provisioning, we take Gourmand and Connoisseur. Both of these are to give us the higher time frames in our food and drinks. So when we're playing tank, we can take advantage of 20 minutes more on food. When we're using damage dealer, we can take advantage of the drink for us to play a more effective damage dealer. Alright. Going over the skills on our bar, starting with the first skill we have Force Pulse. Now this does a blast of 3 damage types, Flame, Frost, and Shock. Primarily the shock damage is what we're looking for from this, because anytime we deal shock damage, remember we get that increased damage output. Being a sorcerer, you also get 5% more shock damage and physical damage output. Up to 2 nearby enemies can take additional magic damage if they were already afflicted with Burning, Chilled, and Concussed. So this is why we use this. This can do a lot of AoE type damage. The next ability we use is called Shock Ring. Now this one, you place a ring on the ground basically, like this, and you do it and it does like a shocking blast. So really nice ability, and it does AoE damage. Next ability we use is called Shock Clinch. Now this does damage up front on the initial hit. It does damage over time, and it also stuns the enemy and deals X amount of shock damage to nearby enemies. So it's a great AoE trash destroying thing. All these abilities here will do damage in AoE format, and that's why I like using it. When you light attack or heavy attack with the lightning staff, it'll also do AoE damage. Next is our execute ability, and that is Endless Fury. This, you call down a lightning bolt that deals X amount of damage. If the enemy falls below 20% health within 4 seconds of being struck, an explosion deals an additional amount of shock damage to them and to X amount of shock damage to other nearby enemies. And then if the enemy is killed within 5 seconds of being hit with this ability, you restore X amount of magicka. Next ability we have is called Inner Light, and we have this here for the slotted purposes. While slotted, your max magic is increased by 5%, and you gain Major Prophecy, increasing your spell critical by 2191. Now, that 5% max magicka is also boosted by another 2% if you take the Mage's Guild passive, Magicka Controller, and it also gives you 2% reduced cost, or 2% increased recovery rate for having this slotted. Our next ability we have on our bar is called the Summon Charged Atronach. Now this thing, you call down an Atronach that arrives at the location dealing X amount of shock damage and stuns enemies for 3 seconds. The Atronach zaps the closest enemy dealing X amount of shock damage every second and periodically deals shock damage to all enemies around it. An ally can activate the synergy, the Charged Lightning synergy, on the thing, which will boost the give the Atronach and that person Major Berserk, increasing their damage done by 25% for 8 seconds. Moving on to the back bar, we have Wall of Elements, or Blockade of Storms, and this thing, you put down a barrier of a storm barrier in front of you that reaches 18 by 12 meters for 8 seconds. It deals X amount of shock damage every second for those 8 seconds, and any enemy hit or shocked while in here that is concussed can be set off balance and stunned for, or can be set off balance, sorry, for 5 seconds. Next ability we have is called Liquid Lightning. This deals X amount of shock damage to the enemy in the area every 12 seconds, and an ally standing in the area can activate the Conduit synergy, dealing X amount of shock damage to enemies around them. Now, that shock damage that this does lasts for 12 seconds. Lightning Flood lasts for 8, but has an 8-meter radius. To this is 4-meter radius. So either one is good. I just use this one for this particular character. Next ability we have is called Power Surge. Now this one is kind of an optional ability. I use it because it's really self-sustaining for you. When you activate it, your character will gain Major Brutality and Major Sorcery, increasing both weapon and spell damage by 20% for 33 seconds. And then while active, your damage, the critical damage heals you for X amount of health every second that you deal damage. So it's actually quite nice. Our next ability on our bar is called Boundless Storms, and this deals X amount of shock damage every second for 23 seconds, and while in this form you get Major Resolve and Major Ward, increasing your spell and physical resistance by 5,280, and activating this grants you Major Expedition for the first 4 seconds, increasing your movement speed by 30%. Next, we have Inner Light. This does X amount, this gives us that extra magicka and that Major Prophecy. And then our last ability here is our ultimate that we use, I would say, on reasons. And that's Power Overload. And this one, you charge your fists with the power of the storms, replacing the light and heavy attacks with new, stronger abilities. Light attacks become lightning bolts, dealing X amount of shock damage to an enemy up to 32 meters away. Heavy attacks blast enemies in a 6 by 15 meter area for X amount of damage, and then attacks deplete ultimate until you run out or the ability is toggled off. So when you activate this ability, you'll basically do this, and your character will get these lightning arms, and while the duration is up, you can throw lightning bolts, or you can actually zap lightning, but I'm already out of magicka, so... but you can zap them with, like, Force Lightning from Star Wars. It's really cool. And that is the skills. Now we're going to jump over to the CP, starting with the Red Tree. In the red tree, we have 56 in Ironclad. This reduces damage taken from direct damage attacks by 20%. Moving to the middle red tree, we have 38 in the light armor focus. This increases your physical resistance by 3250 while wearing 5 or more pieces of light armor. We have 31 into thick skin, reducing your damage taken from damage over time effects by 13%. 43 into hardy, reducing damage taken from physical poison and disease damage by 10%. 43 into Elemental Defender, reducing damage taken from flame, frost, shock, and magic damage by 10%. And then moving on to the last red tree, we have 40 into Bastion, increasing the effectiveness of your damage shields by 16%. 19 into Quick Recovery, increasing your healing received by 5%. And then moving on to the first green tree, we have Warlord, which is 40 points, which reduces your damage, or reduces your cost to break free by 16%. 16 into Sprinter, which reduces sprint cost by 10%. 16 into Bashing Focus, reducing bash cost by 10%. And then moving on to the middle green tree, we have 75 in Arcanus. This increases magic recovery by 14%. And 43 into Tenacity, which increases your magic and stamina of your fully charged heavy attacks by 10%. Excuse me. Moving on. 40 into Tumbling, reducing your dodge roll cost by 16%. 40 into Shadow Ward, reducing your block cost by 16%. Moving on to the blue tree. We are primarily set up to be a damage dealer here, so we have 43 into Blessed, increasing your healing done by 10%. 56 into Elfborn, increasing your critical damage and critical healing with magic abilities by 20%. 56 into Elemental Expert, increasing Flame, Frost, Shock, and magic damage done by 12%. Remember, you get 5% more shock damage, so you actually get 17% shock damage. Moving on, we have 35 in the Staff Expert. This increases your damage done with light and heavy attacks for destruction and resto staffs, as well as Overload, which is one of the abilities we use. We get 20% more damage with it. Then we have 40 in the Master at Arms, increasing your damage done with direct damage attacks by 16%. And then moving on over here, we have 40 in the Thaumaturge, increasing your damage done with damage over time effects by 16%. And that is the CP. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do a quick parse on this little skeleton here so we can see, or I can just show you how effective this thing can be in damage. And we are going to start with the back bar where we're going to use our buffs. First, drop our Wall of Elements, our Liquid Lightning. Oops. I screwed up there, that's fine. And there we go. We did 22k DPS, and that's with making several mistakes along the way. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. Just so you guys can see, we go to 3,695 spell damage with 59% spell critical, 70% critical damage, and 4k spell penetration. Our abilities do a large amount of damage. If you look, our Endless Fury hit once for 21,000 damage. That's pretty dang good. And then our Shock Clinch hit for about 11k. Most of our other abilities just do damage over time. Now we're going to go up to this one, and this is going to show you damage, what it'd be like in a really organized group, and what your DPS can look like there. It's going to probably be close to 40k. So, Potion, same routine. Oops. There we go, I made mistakes again. And I'm going to go ahead and use some ultimates here. I want to show you guys what the other one looks like, but I think I'm going to have to hold off until we get into the dungeon with that. And the nice thing is that you can even use that ring of shock to do that too. So we're going to let this run out, and I have gotten up to about 40k DPS with this thing on that target dummy. It's not easy. I'm not gonna lie, it's really difficult for me to do that because I have to have a perfect rotation, and I am having a little bit of a trimmer issue today. So, all right, now we're gonna take a look at this on the target dummy, what our damage looked like there. As you can see, in an organized group, we're gonna have roughly around 4,338 spell damage with 65% spell crit, 70% critical damage, and a roughly 100% crit penetration value. It doesn't show that here, but it is that way, and you're going to have higher damage output from all of your abilities. You can see the shock ring was doing like 22k damage. The power overload was hitting for about 34k damage on crits, 26 on normal light attacks, and that's when I was doing the rotation with that. Our force pulse was doing a decent amount of damage with all three types. Shock clinch did a decent amount of damage over time and up front on its initial hit. Storm Fist was doing a good amount of damage on its fist closure and its damage over time. Now this thing only procced roughly about 5 times in total in that rotation. So now that I've shown you guys that, we're going to go ahead and take this over to a dungeon, and no, I do not need to change anything with this. This thing is that OP. Because we have self-healing and we have really high resistances, we don't really need a damage shield. If we get to a point where I need a damage shield, I will equip one. Thank you, computer, for doing that. So we're going to check out Depths of Malatar again. Depths of Malatar is the latest dungeon added with Wrathstone DLC. It is a very challenging and difficult dungeon, but it is also a lot of fun on normal difficulty. And on veteran difficulty, if you are not experienced with the dungeon, I would suggest running through it several times on normal before you do it on veteran. Now, I'm going to get asked, can this character solo play? Yes, this character can solo play. In fact, it's probably one of the most powerful solo play characters I've ever created because it's got so much damage output and sustainability and survivability. Like I said, this thing's just a beast. And this thing can also tank like this if you want to. I would suggest using a shield though. I'm saving the Atronach for when we fight the big cheese. I think I saw him. Yep. I did. And like I said, you do so much damage with this character in just dot damage that you don't even need to worry about anything. And you can keep up a decent amount of DPS on it if you know how to play the character really well. So I'm not very good, honestly, with magic characters because of the fact that it's just something that's in my DNA, I guess. I don't know. I'm just not that good. There we go. The Maw is gone. We're going to go ahead and die and respawn back at the beginning. But that is the Tempest Storm Mage, guys. I hope it's one that you guys really like. I really like playing this way, but unfortunately it's just not in the cards for me to play this all the time. So I get really bored with it. But a lot of people like this kind of playstyle, and I'm all for it. Go for it. You guys have fun with it. That's why I made it. So, and that brings us to the end of this video. So you know what that means. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.